Hey everyone, welcome back to CBSE Learners. Now let's discuss the second portion of The Best Christmas Present in the World by Mr. Michael Mapugo. Okay, so now it's time to read the letter which was addressed to Mrs. Jim Macpherson. So let's start. Dearest Connie. So here the person who was writing, or Jim Macpherson, who was writing the letter, has addressed his wife as Dearest Connie. I write to you in a much happier frame of mind because something wonderful has just happened that I must tell you about at once. So he's saying that in the letter that he's very happy because something wonderful, something great had happened to him, and he is feeling to tell her about that. We were all standing too in our trenches yesterday. So they were standing where? They were standing in trenches. Now what are trenches? You have seen trenches. You are very well aware of trenches. It's a long deep ditches in the ground where soldiers hide from the enemy. Okay. Now it is usually made for hiding the soldiers from their enemy. So we're all taking their positions in trenches yesterday morning, Christmas morning. So when was the yesterday morning? It was a Christmas morning. It was crisp and quite all about. So the environment or the climate or the ambience was crisp and quite all about, as beautiful a morning as I have ever seen. So it's a beautiful morning, as cold and frosty as a Christmas morning should be. And it was very cold and frosty. There was frost or snow, okay, as a Christmas morning should be. So you have seen that in foreign countries or in Western countries, you will see that the Christmas, during Christmas, there will be, most of the time there will be snowfalls. Okay, so during winter we celebrate Christmas when? During winter. So it's very common to get snow and frost at that time in Western countries. Standing to, here they have given the word meaning. Okay, standing to, taking up positions, trenches, long deep ditches in the ground where soldiers hide from the enemy. Fritz, a name for a German soldier. So here they have given a common name, Fritz, for the German soldier, for referring the German soldiers. Tommy, like they have given name for the German soldier. German soldier also has given a name, Tommy, to refer the British soldiers. That would be that. That was all. That was the end of the matter. Schnapps. Schnapps was a German drink made from grain. Cello, a musical instrument like a large violin. So it's a musical instrument, right? So let's go into the lesson without wasting any further time. I should like to be able to tell you that we began it, but the truth I'm ashamed to say is that Fritz began it. So he is saying that they began something, or they began something, but he is feeling ashamed or shame or shy to tell that Fritz began it. So who began it? Fritz. Now who are Fritz? Already I have said you that they are referring German soldiers as Fritz, a common name for the German soldiers. First, someone saw a white flag waving from the trenches opposite. So, from the opposite side trenches, they saw that someone was waving a white flag. Now, what does a white flag mean? A white flag means peace. Have you ever heard that the white color describes peace, or it refers peace? Yes. So its white flag was used in any battle or war to, as a symbol of peace. Okay, now then they were calling out to us from across no man's land. So across no man's land means from the warfield or the battlefield. Happy Christmas, Tommy, happy Christmas. So what they were saying or calling out to them from across the battlefield, that happy Christmas, right? So they were greeting them happy Christmas. When we had got over the surprise, some of us shouted back. So they were surprised that their enemy were greeting them happy Christmas. But when they got over, when it was okay, they are wishing us, when it became okay to them, seemed okay to them, some of us, few of them, British soldiers, they wished back or greeted back to the German soldier, "Same to you, Fritz, same to you." I thought that would be that. We all did. So they thought that, okay, the matter will end here only. It's not going to proceed further. But then suddenly one of them was up there in his grey great coat and waving a white flag. So the dress of the German soldiers were grey in color, grey great coat, and they were waving a white flag, a flag for as a symbol of peace. "Don't shoot, lads." So they said, they shouted from some enemy soldiers shouted that, "Please don't shoot." Okay, and no one did. And so since they have said and requested not to shoot, no one shot. Okay, then there was another Fritz up on the parapet, and another. So slowly they saw that continuously German soldiers were coming. Okay, and another, "Keep your heads down." I told the men it's a trick, but it wasn't. So he ordered that his fellow soldiers to keep their heads down, because he assumed that it can be or it might be a trick to fool them. But he was surprised that it was not. One of the Germans was waving a bottle above his head. So one of the German soldier was waving a bottle above his head. It is Christmas Day, Tommy. We have schnapps. So they have shown the British soldiers, the German soldiers, that it's a Christmas Day, and they have a drink called schnapps. We have sausage. So they said that they are also having sausage. So we meet you. So they asked them, can they meet them? Yes, can they meet them means whether they can meet or not the British soldiers. So they have asked the German soldiers. By this time there were dozens of them walking towards us across no man's land, and not a rifle between them. So there were dozens of soldiers who are walking across the no man's land or the battlefield, but they were not carrying their rifle. Little Private Morris was the first up. So Little Private Morris was a person. He was, "Okay, ready? Come on, boys, what are we waiting for?" And then there was no stopping them. I was the officer. I should have stopped them there, and then I suppose. But the truth is that it never even occurred to me I should. So he is saying that though he was the officer, he was unable to stop. Though he failed to stop them, but actually it didn't happen that he stopped them. He didn't stop them. Okay, all along their line and ours, I could see men walking slowly towards one another, grey coats, khaki coats meeting in the middle. So from their side also soldiers were moving, and from the German side also soldiers were moving, and both they were meeting in the middle of the battlefield. And I was one of them. I was part of it. So he also continued to do the same. In the middle of the war, we were making peace. So between the war, they were making peace in the battlefield. Now here they have given out some more meanings. Marzipan. Marzipan is what? A sweet covering on a cake made from sugar, eggs and almonds. So it's a cake or a sweet covering on a cake. On a cake they will give a sweet covering, just a decorative layer which was made up of sugar, eggs and almond, like whipped cream. Okay. Dugout, a shelter for soldiers made by digging a hole in the ground and covering it. So dugout is a shelter for soldiers where soldiers will hide themselves by digging a hole in the ground and they will cover it. You cannot imagine, dearest Connie, my feelings as I looked into the eyes of the Fritz officer. So here the letter once again continues. So the Jim Macpherson, or the captain, he was telling his wife that he cannot you cannot imagine that his feelings was like he cannot express that, and his wife cannot even imagine also his feeling. I looked into the eyes of the Fritz officer who approached me, hand outstretched. So one Fritz officer, he came and approached Jim, hand outstretched. How he approached? Hand outstretched. Hans Ulf. His name was Hans Ulf. He said, gripping my hand warmly. He gripped his hand warmly and held it tightly. I am from Dusseldorf. So from where he was from Dusseldorf. I play the cello in the orchestra. So he used to play cello. It's a musical instrument. He used to play in a band or an orchestra. Happy Christmas. So what he had done, he has greeted him, Happy Christmas. Captain Jim Macpherson, I replied. So in reply, Jim replied that his name is Captain Jim Macpherson, and a happy Christmas to you too. I am a school teacher from Dorset in the west of England. So he replied that he is a school teacher from Dorset. His place was Dorset and in the west of England. It is located in the west of England, Dorset. Ah, Dorset, he smiled. I know this place. I know it very well. So he said that he knows about the place. He knows about the place Dorset very well. We shared my rum ration and his excellent sausage. So they shared with each other the rum and the excellent sausages which belong to the French soldiers. And we talked. Connie, how we talked. He spoke almost perfect English. So the Hans Wolf, he spoke perfect English, but it turned out that he had never set foot in Dorset. But he was surprised to know that the Hans Wolf never visited Dorset, or he had never seen England also. He had learned all he knew of England from school and reading books in English. So whatever he had learned about England and his language, English, everything was from his school and from reading books. His favorite writer was Thomas Hardy. His favorite book, Far From Madding Crowd. So his favorite author was Thomas Hardy, and his favorite book was Far From a Madding Crowd. So out there in no man's land, we talked of Bathsheba and Gabriel Oak, Sergeant Troy and Dorset. So in that battlefield, they have discussed about Bathsheba and Gabriel Oak and Sergeant Troy and Dorset. Okay. He had a wife and one son born just 6 months ago. So he is also having a wife and he is also having a son who 6 months of age. As I looked about me, there were hurdles of khaki and grey everywhere, all over no man's land. So when he was looking around, he can see that there were lots of khaki and grey. Khaki and grey is referred to the khaki referred to the British soldiers and grey to the German soldiers. Okay, and instead of fight and shooting and everything, there was only smoking, laughing, talking, drinking, eating. Hans Wolf and I shared what was left of your wonderful Christmas cake. So they have taken that Christmas cake. Jim's wife made the Christmas cake for him, and they shared the wonderful Christmas cake. Jim shared the wonderful Christmas cake, leftover wonderful Christmas cake with Hans Wolf. He thought the marzipan was the best he had ever tasted. So he said the marzipan was the best, and he agreed, and Jim agreed to that. We agreed about everything. So Jim and Hans Wolf agreed in everything, though they were enemy and he was my enemy. So they have agreed to everything, but still he was his enemy. There never was a Christmas party like it, Connie. So he never felt a Christmas party like this before. He have never seen a Christmas party like it before. Why? Because they were both enemies, still they were celebrating together. Then someone, I don't know who, brought out a football. Great coats were dumped in piles to make goalposts. Then they made goalpost out of what? Out of great coats. And the next thing we knew, it was Tommy against Frizz out in the middle of the no man's land. So in the battlefield, they started to play saucer, okay, or football. Hans Wolf and I looked on and cheered, clapping our hands and stamping our feet to keep out the cold as much as anything. So Hans Wolf and they started cheering them, and they clapped their hands and stamped their foot to cheer them up and to drive away the cold. There was a moment, so between whom the match was? Between Germans and the British. Instead of fight and war, there were football match they were playing in the battlefield or in the war field. Okay. There was a moment when I noticed our breath mingling in the air between us. So there was a moment he found that their breath. So in winter season, you can see some sort of vapor kind of coming out of your mouth. You can That's your breath, right? So they saw that both of their breath were mingling in between them. He saw it too and smiled. Jim Macpherson, he said after a while, I think this is how we should resolve this war. So after some time, he said that like this, we should solve all the problems between us. There should not be war anymore, right? So he said to Jim Macpherson, a football match, no one dies in a football match. No children are orphaned, no wives become widows. So he has stated a very beautiful thing or beautiful lines that in football match, though it will bring rivalry between two teams, but in football match no one is going to die, right? But in war, several people, several soldiers, they were dying, their children are becoming orphaned and their wives are becoming widow. So he said they should resolve the war by the way they are playing the football, and after football match no one is going to stay enemy for lifelong, right? But in war they are creating permanent enemies. It's not going to solve, and several lives are sacrificed during war. I prefer cricket, I told him. So he said, I prefer cricket. Then we Tommies could be sure of winning probably. Then he said that we can win probably. We laughed at that and together we watched the game. Because he was not having any answer, so he preferred to divert the thing by divert his statement by saying that he preferred cricket. I told him. Then we Tommies, and he said then we prefer cricket. Englishmen prefer cricket. So if there will be a cricket match, then they are going to win instead of saucer. We laughed at that and together we watched the game. Sad to say, Connie Fritz won 2-1. So it's very sad that Germans, they won by 2-1. They got 2 goals and they got 1 goal. But as Hansel generously said, our goal was wider than theirs, so it wasn't quite fair. The time came, and all too soon, when the game was finished, the schnapps and the rum and the sausage had long since run out, and we knew it was all over. I wished Hans well and told him I hoped he would see his family again soon, that the fighting would end and we could all go home. So the time came when the game was over and schnapps, rums, everything, it was over, and they knew that now the party or the enjoyment of the merrymaking is going to end. Jim said to Hans that soon he is going to meet his family and this fight is also going to end soon and they can go home. I think that is what every soldier wants. Wants on both sides, Hanswolf said. So Hanswolf said that every soldier want that only, that they want to go back to their home and meet their wife and children. Take care, Jim Macpherson, he said. Take care of yourself. I shall never forget this moment, nor you. He saluted and walked away from me slowly, unwillingly, I felt. He turned to wave just once and then became one of the 100 of grey-coated men drifting back towards their trenches. So he said he will never forget that moment. He saluted and he went back to their trenches. So he was about to go back to their trenches. He just turned to wave goodbye, and he after going there, he just mixed up with the 100 of grey-coated men who were going back to their trenches. That night, back in our dugouts, we heard them singing a carol and singing it quite beautifully. It was still silent night. Our boys gave them a rousing chorus of Wild Shepherd watched. We exchanged carol for a while and then we all fell silent. We had our time of peace and goodwill, a time I will treasure as long as I live. So he's saying that that night in their dugouts, the fit soldiers or German soldiers, they sang carol. They sang carol, and the name of the carol will be the Still Natch Silent Night. And even these British soldiers, they have also sang along with them. They have exchanged carols for a while, and afterwards they all became silent. We had had our time of peace and goodwill, a time I will treasure as long as I live. He said that in that war field, they found a little bit time of peace and goodwill, a time which he is going to treasure, he is going to store, he is going to keep along with him as long as he lives. Dearest Connie, by Christmas time next year, this war will be nothing but a distant and terrible memory. So he said to his wife that next year, by this Christmas time, there will be no war, but the distance and this memory will be terrible. I know from all that happened today how much both armies long for peace. We shall be together again soon, I am sure of it. So he said that from that incident, from that particular incident, he understood that both the armies, whether it can be it is British army or the German army, both of the armies, they want only peace, they are longing for peace, and so that they can be together, so they are expecting to be together once again. Your loving Jim. So he has ended the letter with your loving Jim. Okay, so this was the letter. Now this, let's see the comprehension check. Who had written the letter to whom? So Mr. Jim Macpherson has written the letter to his wife, Mrs. Jim Macpherson. Why was the letter written? What was the wonderful thing that had happened? So why he has written the letter? To describe her the incident, or a wonderful incident that happened that day. And what was the incident? They have both the Germans and the British soldiers had celebrated the Christmas together. That was the incident. What jobs did Hans Wolf and Jim Macpherson have when they were not soldiers? So Hans Wolf was what? He was a cello player, right? He used to play cello in an orchestra or a band. And Jim Macpherson was a school teacher when they were not soldiers. Had Hans Wolf ever been to Dorset? No, Hans Wolf was never been to Dorset. Why did he say he knew it? Because he had read in his books, readings to books or storybooks. Do you think Jim Macpherson came back from the war? How do you know this? So for this you need to read further, and I think he didn't return. Jim Macpherson, according to me, I think Jim Macpherson didn't came back home from the war, because this letter is only the proof of the incident, right? So next, see the third part. I folded the letter again and slipped it carefully. So once again, the author or the narrator here, he folded the letter and he kept it back in it to its envelope. I kept awake all night. He didn't sleep after reading the letter. By morning, I knew what I had to do. By morning, he knew what he had to do. I drove into Bridport, just a few miles away. So he went to Bridport, which was few miles away from his home. I asked a boy walking his dog where Copper Beaches was. So he asked a boy who was walking along with his dog the address of Copper Beaches. House number 12 turned out to be nothing but a burned out shell, the roof gaping, the windows boarded up. So where he gone to find out the house number 12. Why? To find out Mrs. Jim Macpherson. Because according to him, since the letter was along with him, according to the author or the narrator, the letter didn't reach to Mrs. Jim Macpherson, right? So house number 12, when he gone to find out the house number 12, he saw there is nothing but a burned out shell, and the roof was gaping, the windows boarded up. I knocked at the house next door and asked if anyone knew the whereabouts of Mrs. Macpherson. So he went to the neighbor house and he asked whether anybody knows about anything about Mrs. Macpherson. Oh yes, said the old man in his slippers. He knew her very well. So he said yes, he knew her very well. A lovely old lady, he told me. A bit muddle-headed, but at her age she was entitled to be, wasn't she? So he said that she's a little bit muddle-headed, okay, and a little bit because of that was because of her age only, okay. And Oh, yes, said the old man in his sleeper. He knew her very well. A lovely old lady, he told me, a bit muddle-headed, but at her age she was entitled to be, wasn't she? 101 years old. She had been in the house when it caught fire. So she was 101 years old, and she was in the house when the house was on fire. No one really knew how the fire had started, but it could well have been candles. So nobody knew how the house got fired but might be the candles were responsible. She used candles rather than electricity. So most of the time she used to use the candle rather than electricity, because she always thought electricity was too expensive. So she never took electricity because she used to think that electricity is very expensive, candles are better. The fireman had got her out just in time. She was in nursing home now, he told me. Burlington House on the Dorchester Road on the other side of the town. So he said that her house caught fire, and because of candles. It might be because of candles, because she always used to use candles instead of electricity. And the fireman, she survived because the fireman had got her out in perfect time, in correct time. She was in nursing home now she was in nursing home. She's in nursing home, and the nursing home was located the name of the nursing home is Burlington House, and it's located on the Dorchester Road on the other side of the town. Okay, so here they have given the word meaning: burned out, destroyed by fire, boarded up, covered with wooden boards, muddled head, confused. So okay, today we are going to discuss up to this only. Next video I am going to discuss this comprehension check followed by this stanza. Okay, thank you, thanks a lot.